Babe, Amber, what is going on here?
8 months abroad. 8 months of early mornings in a foreign city, of falling asleep on video calls, of counting down the days until she could walk back through her own front door and feel like herself again. 8 months of trusting two people with everything she had, her home, her dog, her savings, her life. Her husband Brett. And her best friend Amber. The two people she would have bet anything on. The two people she had never once, in 14 years of marriage and 18 years of friendship, had a single reason to doubt. Claire Henderson came home on a Thursday evening. No announcement. No warning. Just a cab ride from the airport, a suitcase on the concrete, and a gift for Amber still wrapped in tissue paper in her carry-on. She was smiling before she even reached the front path. She was already imagining Brett's face. Already imagining Scout losing his mind at the door. Already home, in every way that mattered, before she got there. And then the front door opened. Amber came out first. Weekend bag on her shoulder. Hair down. Mid-laugh at something, head turned back toward the doorway, until she saw Claire standing on the path. And the laugh stopped. And behind her, filling the doorway with one hand on the frame and the other settled at the small of Amber's back, the way you touch someone you have touched 1,000 times, was Brett. Claire's husband. The man who had stood at that departure's gate 8 months ago and told her he was proud of her. That she should go. That he would be right here when she got back. He was right there. He just wasn't waiting for her. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. And in the silence of that porch, under that yellow evening light, Claire Henderson understood something that would take weeks to fully prove but only seconds to know. This was not an accident. This was not a stumble. What she was looking at had a history. It had a timeline. It had been built, carefully and patiently, inside the life she had trusted two people to protect. And what she was about to uncover, over the 3 weeks that followed, was not just an affair. It was a plan. Coordinated. Deliberate. And years in the making. Stay with me. Because this story goes so much deeper than you think. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you aren't subscribed yet, hit that button now so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Before we go any further, I need you to understand something about Claire Henderson. Because the easiest thing in the world is to hear the beginning of a story like this and think, I would have seen it coming. I would have known. But Claire was not a naive woman. She was not someone who drifted through life without paying attention. She was a financial consultant. Sharp, methodical, trained to find the thing that doesn't add up. She had spent 18 years building what she believed was one of the most honest friendships of her life. 14 years building a marriage she thought was solid. So the question is not whether Claire was paying attention. The question is how two people who claimed to love her managed to construct an entire parallel life, right underneath her, without a single seam showing. And there are 3 questions sitting at the center of this story. The first, how long had it actually been going on, and was the answer going to be worse than anything Claire was already imagining? The second, how many people in her life had known, and looked her in the eye anyway, and said nothing? And the third, the one that would keep her awake at 3 in the morning for months after, had any of it ever been real? The friendship. The marriage. The going away dinner, the airport goodbye, the I love yous at the departure's gate. Had any of it meant what she had believed it meant? Those questions don't have easy answers. And I'll be honest with you, some of what we uncover in this story is going to be hard to sit with. Because by the time we reach the end, this will not look like a marriage that simply fell apart. It will look like something far more calculated than that. It will look like two people who examined Claire's life, her home, her income, her future, and made a decision. A quiet, patient, coordinated decision. So let's go back to the beginning. To who Claire Henderson was before any of this. And to the friendship she would have given anything to protect. Claire Henderson grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, the middle child of a schoolteacher and a contractor. She was the kind of kid who finished her homework before dinner, remembered to write thank you notes, and held the family together without anyone asking her to. She carried that instinct into everything, her career, her friendships, her marriage. She became a financial consultant. Meticulous, reliable, the person clients called when something didn't reconcile and they needed someone who would stay with the numbers until they told the truth. She was good at her work the way people are good at things that are also deeply who they are, not just skilled at it but built for it. Calm under pressure. Clear when everything around her was complicated. Precise without being cold. She met Brett Henderson at 29, at a work conference in Charlotte. He was an engineer. Steady and dry-humored and attentive in a way that felt rare. He made her feel, she would say later, like the most considered person in any room they shared. They married at 33. No children by choice. A dog named Scout. A brick house in a suburb outside Nashville that they had renovated slowly, weekend by weekend, until every room felt like a decision they had made together. From the outside it looked complete. From the inside, Claire believed it was. She poured herself into that marriage the way she poured herself into everything she valued, without reservation, without holding anything back, with the full assumption that what she gave was what she was receiving in return. What everyone who knew Claire said about her was that she made the people around her better. She remembered the details, the follow-up text after a hard week, the birthday call at exactly the right moment, the way she would drive 40 minutes to sit with a friend who needed company and never once make it feel like an inconvenience. She extended that same quality to her marriage. When Brett went through a difficult period professionally, Claire restructured her own schedule to absorb the pressure. When their investments needed attention, she stayed up late running the numbers so he wouldn't have to carry it. She gave and gave and gave because it was simply how she was made, and she assumed, as generous people often fatally do, that the people she loved were made the same way. She was wrong. But she didn't know that yet. In the fall of the year this story begins, all Claire Henderson knew was that she had been offered the opportunity of her career. And she had no reason in the world not to take it. Amber Sutton had been Claire's best friend since the first week of college at the University of Tennessee. Same dormitory floor. Same intro sociology class. By the second week of September they were sharing a dining hall table every morning, and by October they were the kind of friends who finish each other's sentences and know each other's orders and call without texting first because they already know the other one will pick up. Amber was everything Claire was not in the most complimentary way, loud where Claire was measured, spontaneous where Claire was structured, magnetic in rooms in a way that made people naturally orient toward her. She was the one who talked Claire into the road trip, the last-minute flight, the just say yes weekend. She was the one who cried at Claire's wedding and gave a toast that made the whole room laugh and then go quiet. She was, by every visible measure, exactly what a best friend is supposed to be. For 18 years, Claire had no reason to read her as anything else. But there were things Claire didn't see. Or rather, things she saw and filtered through the lens of someone who had long ago decided this woman was safe. Amber had never quite settled. 3 serious relationships, none lasting past 2 years. A career that moved sideways more than forward. A lifestyle that looked effortless on social media and was, in quieter moments, something Amber described as exhausting to maintain. She compared herself to Claire, not openly, not in a way that ever broke the surface, but consistently. Dressed in jokes. Wrapped in compliments. "You always land on your feet," she'd say. "Everything just works out for you." Claire heard affection in those words. She didn't hear the edge. She didn't register that Amber had begun spending more time at the Henderson house than at her own apartment. That Amber and Brett had developed their own rhythm, their own references, their own easy shorthand, that existed entirely apart from Claire. She trusted them both too completely to read what was already being written right in front of her. Claire left for Edinburgh on a Thursday morning in early October. Brett drove her to the airport. The night before, Amber had come for a goodbye dinner, homemade pasta, a bottle of wine Claire had been saving, the kind of evening that felt warm and unhurried and exactly right. They had laughed until late. Amber had cried when she hugged Claire at the door, which Claire found touching. Amber always felt things loudly. It was one of the things she had always loved about her. At the airport the next morning, Brett held her at the security line longer than usual. He said he was proud of her. He said 8 months would go fast. He said he loved her. Claire believed every word. She had no reason not to. She cleared security, found her gate, and sent a voice note to the private chat she and Amber shared, just the two of them, 11 years of messages in a thread they had named Forever and Always on a late-night road trip to Knoxville. Amber replied with 3 red heart emojis. It was the last completely honest exchange they would ever have. The first 4 months in Edinburgh were hard but good. Claire threw herself into the work. She video-called Brett every few evenings. She and Amber texted daily, voice notes, memes, the low-stakes constant contact that is the native language of a close friendship. She sent Scout's favorite treats from a pet shop near her apartment. She found the tartan scarf for Amber at a market on a rainy Saturday and wrapped it carefully in tissue paper, thinking about her reaction when she opened it. She was 3,000 miles away and still showing up. But somewhere around month 5, things shifted. Brett's calls got shorter, he was tired, he said, work was heavy. Amber's texts slowed, she was busy, she said, life was just a lot right now. Claire sat with the unease of it and told herself she was being anxious. That distance distorts things. That she should trust the people who had never given her a reason not to. She pushed the feeling down and kept working. She had no idea that back in Nashville, Amber's car was parked in her driveway 4 nights a week. She had no idea that the life she was funding from 3,000 miles away was being lived by someone else entirely. Claire finished her contract 2 days early. The final deliverable came together faster than expected, the client signed off on a Wednesday afternoon and by Thursday morning she was booked on the first available flight home. She told no one. Not Brett. Not Amber. She had been thinking about the surprise for weeks, had a recipe pulled up on her phone for Brett's favorite meal, had the ingredients listed out ready to grab at the store on the way from the airport. She imagined his face when he heard the key in the lock. She imagined Scout before she even got the door fully open. She imagined calling Amber that night, laughing at herself for actually managing to keep a secret. She was so full of that imagined homecoming that she barely slept on the transatlantic flight. She just sat in the dark cabin and watched the hours count down and felt, for the first time in 8 months, completely at ease. She was going home. Everything was exactly where she had left it. The cab from the airport took 40 minutes. It was early evening, the sky going gold the way Nashville does in October, and Claire sat in the back with her carry-on on her lap and the tartan scarf still in tissue paper in the front pocket of her bag. She didn't touch her phone. She wanted to walk through the door and see their faces, unguarded, unposed, real. She needed that moment. The cab turned onto her street and she saw the house from half a block away. Lights on inside. Brett's truck in the driveway. And beside it, a white car she recognized without having to think about it. She had fallen asleep in the passenger seat of that car on a road trip to Memphis 4 summers ago. It was Amber's. Claire smiled. Even better, she thought. Both of them. She'll walk in and get both of them at once. She paid the driver, pulled her suitcase from the trunk, and walked up the path toward her front door, still smiling, still imagining their faces, completely unaware that the scene she was about to walk into had nothing to do with the one she had constructed in her head. She was 10 feet from the door when it opened. Amber came out first. The olive green weekend bag, the one Claire had helped her pick out at a boutique in Germantown 2 years ago, was on her shoulder. Her hair was down. She was wearing a shirt Claire had never seen. She was mid-laugh at something, head turned back toward the doorway, and she didn't see Claire on the path until she had already taken 3 steps onto the porch. The laugh stopped. Not gradually, all at once, like something cut. And in the doorway behind her, filling the frame with one hand on the wood and the other resting at the small of Amber's back with the ease of a man who had made that gesture 1,000 times, was Brett. He saw Claire a half-second after Amber did. His hand dropped. The three of them held the triangle on the porch in a silence that lasted 4 seconds and felt like a full minute. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The porch light was on. Everything was too yellow, too still, too clear. Brett said Claire's name. Just her name. Nothing after it, no explanation rushing in to fill the space, no instinctive reach toward her, just her name in a voice that was trying to sound normal and landing somewhere short of it. Amber said it too, Claire, and her voice was trying for steadiness and not finding it. Claire looked at the weekend bag. She thought about what a weekend bag means. Not an overnight. A weekend. She thought about Amber's drawer, because there would be a drawer, she understood that immediately, there is always a drawer, and about what would be in it. She thought about the toothbrush she had always kept for Amber in the guest bathroom and what that toothbrush had meant for the past however long. All of it moved through her in the span of a single breath. She held up one hand. Flat. Open. Stop. And they both stopped. And she walked past them, through the front door, into the house that still smelled like her candles, and she sat down on the kitchen floor. Scout found her within seconds and pressed himself against her side. She put her hand on his back. And she did not make a sound. She heard Amber's car start. She heard it back out slowly, carefully, the way you drive when you're trying not to make noise, and then pull away down the street. She heard Brett close the front door. She heard him stand in the hallway for a long moment, longer than felt natural, before his footsteps came toward the kitchen. He stood in the doorway and looked at her on the floor. He sat down across from her. And Claire looked at him with the particular clarity of a woman who has just had every assumption she operated from yanked out from under her, and she said nothing. She let the silence sit. She had spent 8 months learning how to be alone in foreign rooms, and this silence was not like any of those. It was not lonely, it was not anxious, it was something else entirely. It was the silence of a woman taking inventory. Of a woman deciding what she needed to understand before she said a single word that could not be unsaid. Brett spoke for a long time. He used the architecture of a man building a defense before a verdict has been reached, complicated, gradual, I never meant for. He did not say how long. He said it had never been his intention to hurt her. He said she was away and things shifted. He said he was sorry, eventually, in the way that people say sorry when they mean I'm sorry you found out. Claire listened. She did not interrupt. She did not cry. She asked one question, how long? He paused too long before answering. Whatever number he gave, she filed away to verify. She went to the guest room at midnight, locked the door, let Scout in when he scratched, and sat on the edge of the bed with her laptop open in front of her. Not because she knew yet what she was looking for. But because she was Claire Henderson. And Claire Henderson had never once in her professional life looked away from a set of numbers that didn't add up. She opened the joint bank account. And the silence in the room changed. The balance was not what it should have been. Claire knew their finances the way she knew her own heartbeat. She had managed them for years, knew every standing charge, every pattern, every seasonal variance. What she was looking at was roughly 60% of what the account should have held after 8 months of her full salary depositing directly into it. She did not panic. Panic was not available to her in that mode. She opened the transaction history and began to read from the beginning. The withdrawals were small. Irregular enough to avoid looking like a pattern to anyone who wasn't paying close attention, but she was paying close attention, and she could see the pattern immediately. The specific spacing. The rotating vendor descriptions. The wire transfer labeled only as miscellaneous. The recurring charge to a company name she did not recognize. This was not a man who had been careless with a debit card. This was someone who understood how account monitoring worked and had deliberately structured withdrawals to stay beneath the threshold of obvious concern. She scrolled back through 6 months. Then 8. She pulled up a notepad and started writing figures in columns. By 4 in the morning she had a timeline. By 5 she had a total. The amount that had been redirected out of their joint finances during her time abroad was significant, not ruinous in isolation, but substantial enough to be intentional, and structured in a way that required either financial literacy or guidance from someone who had it. She closed the laptop. She lay down without getting under the covers. Scout was warm against her leg. She stared at the ceiling and thought about Brett's voice in the kitchen, not the words, but the specific quality of the pauses between them. The pause before how long? The pause before sorry. She thought about what those pauses meant in a man who was usually composed. She thought about the company name she hadn't recognized in the transaction history. She made a note to search it in the morning. And then she closed her eyes and did not sleep and waited for it to be light enough to make a call. She called her sister in Raleigh at 7 in the morning. She gave no details, just asked for the name of a good family attorney, Nashville preferred, and asked for it before noon. Her sister sent 3 names within the hour. Claire chose the one whose biography was the most direct and left a message before 8. Then she drove to a coffee shop 4 miles from the house, somewhere that wasn't inside those walls, and ordered a black coffee and opened Amber's social media for the first time in months. She had avoided it while abroad. Too much color, too much warmth, too much Nashville when she was trying to stay focused on Edinburgh. She started scrolling backward. She was not looking for anything specific. She found more than she expected. A beachfront rental posted 8 weeks after Claire's departure, tagged 2 states away, captioned with a single wave emoji. A restaurant dinner in a city Brett had told Claire was a business trip destination. A rooftop bar photo on a Thursday night, taken by someone else's hand, in which the left edge of the frame showed a man's arm, a rolled shirt sleeve, and a watch. A Seiko diver in brushed steel. The one Claire had given Brett for their 10th wedding anniversary. She screenshotted it without stopping. She kept scrolling. She went back 18 months and found 43 images total, some obvious, some subtle, some only legible if you knew what you were looking at. She cross-referenced every date against their shared family calendar, still accessible through her account. Work trip weekends. A conference he'd mentioned. A Friday he'd texted saying he'd be home late. Every absence mapped to a photograph. She sat in that coffee shop for 3 hours and built a geographical record of everywhere Brett and Amber had been together while Claire was either at home trusting them or abroad funding them. Then her phone buzzed. The attorney's office calling back. She answered on the first ring. Sandra Reeves was the kind of attorney whose composure communicates, within the first 10 minutes of a meeting, that she has seen everything and is unshockable by design. She asked Claire for documentation, financial records, account statements, any written communication that might be relevant. Claire went back to the house that afternoon while Brett was at work. She moved through the rooms with professional focus, photographing statements, gathering paperwork, building the physical record to match the digital one she had started the night before. She was at the kitchen table when she noticed the family iPad on the counter. Brett used it occasionally for calls. She picked it up, her fingerprint still registered, and was navigating to a shared document when a notification appeared at the top of the screen. A text. From Amber. Displaying in Brett's iMessage because his Apple ID was still logged in. She could see 4 words in the preview. She tapped it. What she found was not 4 words. It was 2 years of them. The thread opened in October, 26 months ago. It started the way you'd expect 2 people in a shared orbit to communicate. Logistics. References to Claire. The casual, functional texture of adjacency. But within 3 months the tone had shifted into something else, endearments, plans, the private vocabulary of people building a world that belonged only to them. Claire read forward without stopping. She read the way she worked, linearly, without rushing to conclusions, letting the record speak before she decided what it meant. She found the message that broke through her composure somewhere around the 8-month mark of the thread. 14 months before she had ever been approached about Edinburgh. Brett had written that things at home felt like they were on autopilot. Amber had replied, "So let's change that." Claire kept reading. 4 months later, 6 months before the Edinburgh contract came through, Amber had sent a message that read, "What if she had a reason to go somewhere for a while?" Brett had replied with a question mark. Amber had replied, "Leave it to me." She sat at the kitchen table and read that exchange 3 times. Then she kept going. She read until she found the name of the professional contact who had reached out to her about the Edinburgh opportunity, the contact she had always believed had found her through her own industry reputation. That name appeared in the thread, in a message from Amber, 6 weeks before the approach. She had not been recruited. She had been selected. The Edinburgh contract, the milestone she had agonized over, the opportunity she had believed validated years of work, the thing that Brett and Amber had both encouraged her to take with such warmth and certainty, had been arranged. The trip that had been designed to look like her biggest professional achievement had been, at its core, a mechanism. They had needed her gone. And they had built her a reason to leave that she would walk through herself, gratefully, without a single question. She did not confront Brett with the messages that day. She photographed every screen. She forwarded everything she could to her own email. She replaced the iPad on the counter exactly where she had found it and left before he came home. She drove to a park nearby and sat with her engine off and thought about the social landscape of her life, every couple they had shared dinners with, every neighbor who had waved from a driveway, every friend who had attended her going-away gathering the week before she left. She began reaching out. Carefully, strategically, not with direct questions, but with the calibrated conversation of a woman who knew how to listen for what wasn't being said. She framed everything as catching up. Re-entry. A woman back from a long trip wanting to reconnect. And in those conversations, in the particular quality of the pauses and the careful word choices and the people who did not quite hold eye contact over video calls, she found her answers. Patricia, a neighbor 2 doors down, said she had seen Amber's car at the house regularly but had told herself it had probably been arranged, that Claire had surely set it up, knowing she'd be away. She said this in the tone of someone who had not quite believed it but had chosen the most comfortable interpretation available. A couple from their wider social circle became suddenly unavailable when Claire suggested getting together, responsive but always just too busy, in the specific way of people managing guilt by managing distance. A colleague of Brett's, a man Claire had met at company events perhaps 4 times, said when she mentioned she was back, "Oh, already? A small thing. 2 words." But the "oh" landed with the particular weight of someone who had expected more time to pass. Someone who had known there was a reason more time was needed. And one of Amber's friends, a woman Claire had met often but never been close to, sent an unprompted text the day after Claire came home that said simply, "I'm sorry, Claire. I should have said something." No elaboration. No follow-up. Just that. It was enough. Claire counted 7 people who had known or strongly suspected and had chosen silence. 7 people who had sat across from her at dinners, who had hugged her at that going-away gathering, who had watched her walk toward a departure gate with a carry-on and a full heart, and had let her go without a word. For days after the driveway. Claire was in an extended-stay hotel. She had decided she could not sleep inside that house while everything was still raw and legally unresolved. She had Scout. She had her laptop and her files and the notepad she had been filling since the night she came home. She was on a call with Sandra when her phone lit up with a text from Amber. She let it sit until the call ended. Then she picked it up and read it. It was 3 paragraphs long. The first paragraph said Amber was sorry for how Claire had found out. Not sorry for what she had done, sorry for the manner of the discovery, as though the problem were the timing and not the 18 years of friendship that had been used as cover for it. The second paragraph explained that she had been in love with Brett for a long time, that she hadn't chosen it, that some feelings outgrow the circumstances they begin inside. The third paragraph said she hoped Claire would find peace. That she would always care about her. That someday, when the pain had settled, she hoped Claire could understand. Claire read it twice. She was looking for the word sorry in any context that acknowledged what had actually been done. It wasn't there. She was looking for the 18 years, for one reference to one moment in 18 years of friendship that acknowledged what that friendship had meant and what had been done to it. That wasn't there either. What the message contained, dressed in the language of honesty and emotional vulnerability, was a justification. Amber's love. Amber's feelings. Amber's hope for Claire's peace. Amber at the center of a story that had been built at Claire's expense. Claire put the phone face down on the hotel bed. She picked up her notepad. She wrote one line at the top of a clean page. Forward to Sandra. She did not respond to Amber directly. She had understood, by then, that the most powerful thing she could say was nothing. And she said it perfectly. Sandra Reeves had been practicing family law in Nashville for 22 years. She was not a woman who expressed alarm casually. But when Claire laid out the complete picture in their second meeting, the transaction history, the iPad messages, the timeline of the Edinburgh arrangement, and the LLC reference she had found threaded through Brett's emails on the shared family account, Sandra set her pen down and was quiet for a moment before she spoke. The LLC was what shifted the room's temperature. Claire had found it while following an email thread about a property management company she didn't recognize, a company name that appeared once, vaguely, in a message about future planning. She had not been able to pull the full incorporation documents herself, but she had brought Sandra enough to work from. Sandra had the rest within 24 hours. The LLC was real. Registered in Tennessee. Brett was listed as primary director. Amber Sutton was listed as co-director. The LLC had been registered 8 months ago. The same month Claire had touched down in Edinburgh. The purpose of the structure, Sandra explained, was property holding. And the property it had been built to hold was the Henderson family home, purchased jointly, appreciated significantly over 9 years, and representing the single largest asset in the marital estate. Brett had begun the legal groundwork to transfer the title out of the marital estate and into the LLC, a structure Claire had no stake in, co-directed by the woman who had spent 18 years calling her a best friend. Sandra used the word deliberate 3 times during that meeting. She used the word fraud once, with the specific restraint of an attorney who does not reach for that word until she is prepared to pursue it all the way. Claire sat across the desk and listened and felt something she had not expected, not more devastation, but a sharpening. A focusing. The particular clarity of a woman who now understands the full shape of what she is looking at and knows exactly what to do with it. There was one more piece. Claire found it herself on a Sunday night, alone in the hotel room, going through Brett's emails with the systematic patience she had spent a career developing. It was a chain between Brett and a man named Gary Tillman, a financial advisor Claire had met once, briefly, at a party at Amber's apartment. She had not known Brett was in contact with him. The chain was 18 months old. In it, Gary Tillman advised Brett on how to restructure joint marital assets in a way that would be difficult to challenge in a divorce proceeding. He recommended the LLC structure. He outlined a timeline. He referenced the importance of initiating the process while the marital dynamic was, in his words, undisturbed. And then, buried in the third paragraph of a reply, he noted that the process would be cleanest if the non-participating spouse were, as he wrote it, out of the picture during the critical transfer window. Out of the picture. Claire read that phrase 3 times. She was sitting in a hotel room in Nashville, having spent 8 months in Edinburgh running financial models for a pharmaceutical client, and a man she had met once at a party was writing emails about how to get her out of the picture. Gary Tillman was Amber's contact. He had been introduced to Brett through Amber. He was, as Claire would describe him to Sandra the next morning, the architect of the blueprint. Sandra filed an emergency injunction to halt the property transfer 44 hours after Claire brought her the email chain. It was granted. The transfer, 14 days from completion, stopped. The LLC was flagged for review. Brett's attorney contacted Sandra's office within 72 hours requesting a conversation about settlement terms. That call told Claire everything she needed to know about the strength of their position. She was in the hotel room when Sandra called to confirm the injunction. She sat with the phone in her hand after the call ended and felt the specific exhaustion of someone who has been running on clarity and adrenaline for 2 straight weeks and has finally, at last, reached something solid enough to rest on. She reached over and put her hand on Scout. She breathed. She had come home 2 days early. She had walked up her own front path on a random Thursday evening with a suitcase and a wrapped gift and a smile she had been saving for days, and in doing so, without knowing it, she had interrupted something that 14 more days would have made very difficult to undo. What Brett and Amber had fundamentally misread about Claire Henderson was what people so often misread about women who are warm and loyal and quietly capable. They had confused her generosity for softness. They had looked at 18 years of unconditional friendship and 14 years of devoted marriage and seen not love but leverage. They had assumed that a woman who gave so freely would be proportionally easy to take from. They were wrong in the most consequential way either of them could have been wrong. Because the same qualities that had made Claire a devoted wife and a steadfast friend, the methodical precision, the tolerance for complexity, the ability to hold enormous amounts of information without losing the thread, were exactly the qualities that made her immovable once she understood she was in a fight. She did not make emotional decisions. She did not act impulsively. She documented everything, questioned everything, and trusted Sandra Reeves to translate her preparation into the legal force it deserved. Within 3 weeks of arriving home she had frozen every joint account she retained authority over, secured the injunction, engaged the forensic financial analyst Sandra recommended, and filed for divorce on grounds that Sandra described, in her measured way, as unusually well supported. Brett's team came back with an initial settlement offer. Sandra described it in one word: optimistic. Claire declined without a counteroffer. She was not interested in a negotiation that still began from the assumption that she was the less informed party. She understood their finances better than Brett did, she always had, she had managed them for years, and she was fully prepared to demonstrate that in any proceeding they chose to pursue. A second offer came 3 weeks later. More serious. Sandra recommended they counter. They did. The back and forth lasted 6 weeks and never reached a courtroom. When the final settlement was signed, Claire retained the Nashville house, her full share of the marital investment accounts, and a financial settlement that directly accounted for the documented redirection of funds during her time abroad. Brett kept his retirement accounts, his truck, and a legal bill his own attorney had apparently described, to someone who eventually told Claire, as significant. She sold the house 8 months after the divorce was finalized. She didn't want to live inside the floor plan of a lie. But the choice to sell was hers. That was the part that mattered. Amber Sutton never issued a statement. She never reached out again after the text that Claire had forwarded directly to Sandra without a reply. In the weeks following the legal filings, her social media went quiet. First the posts stopped, then the stories, then one morning the accounts were simply gone. Deleted entirely. The profiles that had held 2 years of a hidden life, the beachfront rentals, the restaurant dinners, the rooftop bars, the photographs with a familiar watch at the edge of the frame, all of it erased, as though a record could be made to disappear after the fact. Claire had, of course, already screenshotted all 43 images. But she understood what the deletion was. It was not remorse. It was management. Amber had always been very good at curating the version of herself she presented to the world, and she was doing it now, one more time, with the same instinctive self-preservation she had apparently been operating from for years. The difference was that this time, there was no version left worth curating. The group chat went on a Wednesday morning. 11 years of messages, thousands of them, the running living record of a friendship Claire had believed was one of the permanent things in her life. Voice notes. Inside jokes. A voice memo from the morning Claire left for Edinburgh, 30 seconds of Amber's voice saying I love you, be safe, come home soon. All of it deleted from Amber's end without warning. Claire found out when she went to send a message, more out of habit than intention, the muscle memory of a decade of daily contact, and found the thread simply gone. Not archived. Erased. She sat with that for a while. She did not tell herself it had meant nothing. She did not perform that particular convenience, the one where you retroactively hollow out something real so it hurts less. It had been real. It had also been contaminated from somewhere inside it that she had never been able to see. Both things were true. She let them be true at the same time. That was the only honest way to hold it. The divorce was finalized 11 months after Claire walked up her front path with a suitcase and a going-home smile and a gift she never got to give. Brett and Amber moved in together. That information reached Claire through the ordinary osmosis of a shared social world, without her having to look for it. She did not follow their story past that point. She had no interest in its next chapters. What she knew, from years of working with human behavior in high-stakes professional environments, from observing how people operate under pressure, was that a relationship built on the shared project of deceiving someone does not shed that architecture when the deception resolves. The habits don't disappear. The capacity doesn't switch off. The question that lives inside every relationship that began as a betrayal, if they did it once, if they did it to someone they claim to love, doesn't go away just because the original target is out of the picture. She did not wish them bad outcomes. She did not wish them good ones. She extended them the only thing they had actually earned from her, which was nothing at all. Claire relocated to a city she had talked about for years, one she had always said she would live in someday if she were ever given the chance to start completely fresh. She took Scout. She took the professional reputation the Edinburgh contract had only strengthened. She took the forensic clarity she had developed over 14 days in a hotel room and built it into a consulting practice she founded herself, her name on the door, her terms, her clients. She made new friends. Real ones, the kind she now recognized not by how much they gave but by the consistency between what they said and what they did, the small, quiet alignment between words and behavior that she understood, now, was the only reliable indicator of someone's character. She talked about what had happened when it was useful, without drama, without self-pity, with the plain authority of a woman who had been thoroughly and deliberately deceived and had come through it without losing a single essential piece of herself. She was not the same woman who had stood at a Nashville departures gate with a full heart and no reason to doubt. She was something that takes longer to build and is considerably harder to break. She knew exactly what she was worth. And she knew, now, exactly what to do when someone tries to tell her otherwise. Claire told me something I haven't been able to stop thinking about since she said it. She said that the hardest part of what happened to her was not the discovery. It was not the legal process or the hotel room nights or the moment she found the messages. The hardest part was the retrospective. Going back through every memory she had trusted and understanding that it had been witnessed, that Amber had been present for all of it with an agenda running underneath. Every birthday dinner. Every late-night call. Every moment Claire had felt most held by that friendship. Amber had been there, knowing what she was building toward, watching Claire trust her completely. And Brett had stood at that departures gate and held her longer than usual and said I love you, and had meant something by it that had nothing to do with love. The memories don't disappear. That's what people don't understand about this kind of betrayal. They stay exactly where they were. They just mean something different now. And learning to hold a memory that was real and also corrupted, learning to say this happened and it mattered and it was also a lie, is one of the most quietly brutal things a person can be asked to do. Claire did it. Not quickly. Not without cost. But she did it. Because the alternative was letting their version of her story be the last word on it. And that was never going to be something she allowed. So here is the question I want to leave you with tonight. And I want you to sit with it honestly before you answer. Claire Henderson was sharp. She was observant. She was professionally trained to find the thing that doesn't reconcile. She was not naive and she was not inattentive. She simply extended to the people she loved the same good faith she operated from herself. And two people who knew exactly how much she trusted them, used that good faith as a blueprint. So I am asking you directly. Would you have seen it? The calls that got shorter. The texts that slowed. The best friend who stopped mentioning the husband's name. The going away dinner where someone cried at the door. Would you have read those signals for what they were, or would you have done exactly what Claire did, and trusted the people who had never yet given you a reason not to? Leave your answer in the comments. I want to know. There is no wrong answer. But I think if you sit with it honestly, you already know what yours is. If this story stayed with you, if some part of it felt uncomfortably close, or made you think of someone, or made you run a quiet inventory of your own life, you are not alone. The comments on videos like this one fill up for a reason. Not because people are looking for drama. But because these stories name something real. They put language to the patterns that most of us have felt but never quite been able to articulate. The friendship that gave a little too much advice about what you should do with your life. The partner who was a little too enthusiastic about a decision that created distance. The people who went quiet at exactly the wrong moment. Naming these things doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you clear. And clarity is the only real protection any of us have. So tell me, in the comments right now, which moment in Claire's story would have been the one that made you stop? The calls getting shorter. The financial withdrawals. The messages on the iPad. The 7 people who knew and said nothing. Tell me your moment. And if you've lived something like this, or watched someone you love live it, I want to hear that too. This is a space for honest conversation. Always has been. If you're new here, welcome to the Spouse Files. What we do here is not gossip. It is not spectacle for its own sake. It is the careful, unflinching examination of what happens behind closed doors in ordinary homes between people who looked, from the outside, like they had everything figured out. We tell these stories because understanding them makes you harder to fool. Because the woman who can name the architecture of a long deception, who has heard it described, examined, and broken down, is the woman who catches it earlier. That is what we are building here. Subscribe if you haven't. Hit the bell. Because next week we are covering a story that will genuinely stop you,